as I learn about the early days of J-Sei, I'm truly in awe of the dedication and commitment and all the great work that took place back in the day. But I also think about, 50 years, a really long time of incredible work by the staff, the volunteers, the board, and all the people who have contributed their time and made generous donations to get us to where we are today. I'm really inspired by that history. I think the founders should be so proud of the vision that you had. It was solid, and one that is as relevant today as it was back then. I've served on the board for 2 years now. I think it's 2 years. And I'm really honored to have the opportunity to work with the committed group of caring people that surround and make up J-Sei. Everyone that's associated with J-Sei are rock stars. And I'm truly looking forward to continuing to realize the vision with all of you, because that's what it takes, through new and different ways. But thank you very much for this opportunity. I look forward to working with all of you, and we're going to keep it going. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Just on a quick program note, the next Founders presentation will be in October, and it's titled Cultivating Community Legacy Centers of the East Bay. It'll be an exchange of seniors serving organization that emerged from the early efforts of the East Bay Japanese for Action, which included the Berkeley Nikkei Center, the Eden Senior Center, and Sakurakai. So for this evening, I'd like to present our moderator for the discussions tonight. We'll have Ms. Lauren Kawana, a Japanese-American filmmaker from Honolulu. She's been living in the Bay Area for the last 9 years, working on documentary film projects. She will moderate the panel of 3 of the original founders who will discuss their vision and their reason for originating this organization. I hope they're as proud of the results of their early efforts as young activists from Cal. Go Bears. So Lauren, take it away.
Go Bears! Thank you so much, Aki. Good evening, everyone. I'm Lauren. I'm very honored to be here tonight. It's been a true pleasure learning so much more about the J-Sei and its origins, and talking with the founders, the 3 founders that we have tonight. So thank you so much for inviting me to do this and participate. So in honor of J-Sei's 50th anniversary, which is an incredible milestone, we're very happy to be presenting this panel that revisits the origins of 2 very foundational organizations of J-Sei, which is the East Bay Japanese for Action, which was founded in 1971, and East Bay Issei Housing, which was established in 1978. And the 2 later merged into J-Sei, the organization that we celebrate today, which has really been a beacon for the Japanese American community in the East Bay. And I had the pleasure of also hosting the Family Festival last summer, and was just so impressed with the way the staff came together to celebrate despite the challenges of the pandemic. And it's just been so nice to work with everyone at J-Sei. I'm a big fan of the work that you do. And so it's been very cool to learn about the founders and where that inspiration and activism comes from. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our 3 special guests for this evening who played major roles in the activism and community work that it took to provide services and housing for seniors through these 2 original organizations. I would like to welcome our panelists, Dr. Reiko Homma True, Dennis Yotsuya, and Bob Sakai. And starting with Dr. Reiko Homma True. She is originally from Niigata, Japan. She moved to the US in 1958 and was a graduate student in social work at UC Berkeley, one of the first of many bears on this panel, when she became highly attuned to the needs of the Japanese-speaking elderly community, and particularly the Shin Issei, or newcomers from Japan, who she thought were isolated and needed more community support and interaction. And Reiko, along with social worker Murayo Sawai, was pivotal in outreach to Native Japanese American speakers and helped establish social services for seniors through Himawari Kai, which is still in existence today, and later co-founded Issei Japanese for Action. So welcome, Dr. True. Reiko. Our next panelist, Dennis Yotsuya, grew up in a farming family in Cortez near Turlock, California, where he is joining us from tonight. And I hear it's a nut farm, 40 acres, very cool, carrying on the family legacy. He later became a student activist during his time at Cal. He participated in the student strikes demanding ethnic studies courses, which we all know was an incredible movement. And I am a benefactor of that movement. I took Asian American studies in college and benefited from so many incredible courses that changed the course of my life. So thank you for that. His awareness brought on by this student activism around identifying needs for services for Japanese American seniors in the East Bay was part of a student gathering where they visited a senior center in San Francisco, and that kind of sparked the idea. And so he became a co-founder of Issei Japanese for Action as a very young man, which is very inspiring. And that later established outings, social outings, and many, many resources for our seniors. And our third panelist, Bob Sakai, is yet another Cal Bear, although he is a longtime attorney at law specializing in real estate from Hayward, California. I hear he got an engineering degree as well. So there's some very established people on this panel, as you can see. He attended a community meeting in 1976 that was poised to discuss the needs for housing for Japanese American seniors. And he decided to check it out. And lo and behold, later became the co-founder of Issei Housing, which materialized 4 different properties for Japanese seniors, which we'll hear more about. And he served as the first president of the organization for 10 years and on the board until 1995. So our panelists tonight have played a major role in establishing what we know and celebrate today. And thank you so much to all of you for joining us tonight. I'm really looking forward to hearing from you. I will be asking them to share their memories, and we'll kick it off with a few questions. But if you, the audience, have any questions for our panelists as we go along, feel free to type them into the chat, and I'll see if we can direct them at a good point, because I know sometimes we'll think of questions and then if we wait till the end, we'll forget them. So feel free to just put them in there, and Jill, I think, will help me field them, and we'll try and keep this organic, and we'd love to hear your experiences as well after I'm done, asking some questions of our panelists, because I'm sure a lot of people in the audience have been involved in these organizations for a while and also made some great contributions to the legacy of J-Sei. So we'd love to hear from you as we go along. Just a reminder, please keep yourselves muted so that we can hear all panelists clearly. And we'll kick it off without further ado with the Issei Japanese for Action, which, like I said, was founded in 1971. And what is most inspiring to me about it is that it started with a lot of young people and a lot of young people coming together and wanting to make a difference. So I'd like to start with Dennis, who was an undergraduate during an incredible time. The civil rights movement, the ethnic studies movement, the student movements on college campuses, and going from the student strikes in 1968, and which spurred a lot more action in a lot of communities of color, and particularly the Japanese American community. So to start, Dennis, I'd love to hear how all of those movements and your lived experience during that time inspired and led to the establishment of East Bay Japanese for Action.
Am I on?
You're on.
Thank you, Lauren. You talked about Asian studies being developed, and I think that was a big catalyst for getting things going. And as you mentioned, a few of us that were in Asian studies visited a Japanese senior center in San Francisco. And as a result, we thought something similar could be organized in the East Bay. But I think it really was Asian studies classes that kind of planted the seed to begin the project. In 1970, Linda Yamamoto, I think there's a picture of her, basically called their friends and neighbors and friends at Cal to come to a meeting to try and get something going. And the first meeting was at our house in Oakland, and about 30 people attended, and we started to plan this project. The original project was 6 events, 3 field trips and 3 meetings. And part of the meetings were dedicated to talking to the Isseis about the program and if they really wanted it to continue or if they enjoyed the meetings. And we got very positive results, and so we continued to plan events. Now in 1971, we incorporated East Bay Japanese for Action. And then in the fall of 71, we began our first senior center in Berkeley, California. There was a gentleman, I believe he worked for the city. I'm not sure if he was coordinator at the senior center or what, but he was a longtime friend to the Japanese community, and he offered use of their facility to the Japanese community. And so we started our first center there. And picture here shows Amy Mania was the first coordinator, and just a snapshot of the center. In 1972, we obtained a grant from the Commission on Aging. And in that grant, we were to develop 2 additional senior centers and provide outreach to the Isseis. So in 1972, we were able to start the Eden Center with Masako Minami as the coordinator. And she was there for quite a number of years. And then the second was Sakai, and their first coordinator was Jun Sakaguchi. Other projects that we worked on was we had a newsletter which we established to try and inform the Isseis about what we were doing, as well as provide articles about health services and Social Security and those other things. And Morale Sawai was instrumental, along with Reiko, in providing articles. And we had Mr. Oka was a senior advisor to comment on content. And let's see, the 2 other, myself and Kathy Sumimoto Lillenstein, who's on the call, Pam Honda's sister, we were a committee that put the newsletters together and mailed them out. I think it was a quarterly newsletter. And Mariah, so I did most of the heavy lifting, writing the articles. And a lot of you may not remember, but in those days there were no Xerox machines. And so we used what they call a mimeograph. And you had to scribe this wax sheet and put it on this big machine with a roller. You crank it and the pages would come out. So it's quite an ordeal. It wasn't like just stepping up to your copy machine that'll copy and collate and do the whole thing for you. The next project that was an result of Asian studies was an Issei research project, and the chairperson was Bonnie Hashimoto. And the idea was to record oral histories, because at that time, oral histories were kind of coming into our own or starting to be utilized to record history. And there was quite a fight to make them legitimate, since Western historians only relied on written documentation. But anyway, the project was to record oral histories and to get them translated and preserve them and archive them. The results of this project, with many, a lot of technical help, EVJ helped publish this book called Our Reflections, and it contains 15 essays of Issei's telling their personal stories. And it was translated in Japanese and English. And that was one of the results of one of the original programs. With the 3 centers established, the trips were very important to the Isseis, because they found comfort in traveling with their friends and relying on the sanseis to help them if they had questions. And they just thoroughly enjoyed them. And we organized a lot of trips. One of the favorites was to Lake Tahoe and the casinos, but they also went to the Wakamatsu Tea Colony, Hakone Gardens, Grand Canyons, Yosemite and Sequoia National Parks. They also went to Canada and Japan several times, and to Europe. So it gave the Isseis something to look forward to. And I think that really helped put variety in their life, so to speak. We also, established bilingual services and started to help navigate the social service and health services. And we also started our first attempt at housing at the Channing Way House, which was a board and care facility for 4 to 6 Isseis, ambulatory Isseis. The cook for that program was promoted, and she began cooking and for the 1 day a week meal program that we started, which eventually evolved into a 4 day a week program. And the photos here just shows a couple of enjoying meals as well as the activities that happened after lunch. And with that, EVJ just continued these services, and they all grew to 4 days a week and continued until the transition with the housing project and J-Sei.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dennis, for sharing that. I'm sure it's bringing up some memories for all of you as you revisit all of the things you accomplished over time. And while you were a student getting organized, Reiko was also organizing, and I wanted to ask the next question of her in regards to how she started identifying the needs of Shin Issei and native Japanese speakers and newcomers from Japan, and how in that work you started to realize what they needed, what kind of support they were lacking. And so how did you discover these things, and what did you see as the most urgent needs at the time that inspired you to act?
Thank you, Lauren. What happened is that this, working with EVJA at the same time, we were really benefiting from the effort of activist Nisseis, not Sanseis, but there were some activist Nisseis in the East Bay, and some of the names are Edison Uno, Mariana Takagi, Paul Takagi, and Jim Hirabayashi. Those were, many of the Nisseis were kind of a quiet types, but these Nisseis were outspoken, and I think they were a good sort of role model for the Sanseis, that some of them were teaching at UC Berkeley and San Francisco State. And they recognized the need for the Japanese newcomer women. And many of them were war brides. And even though I was not a war bride, but I was also married to an American, not Japanese. And so those of us were kind of shunned from the Japanese American community as like, we were not quite fitting in. But these Nisseis felt that because we were not accepted by either the Japanese American community or the majority American community, many of them, or us, were having problems. Some had marital problems, some were abused, and some had really, cultural adjustment problems. So the Issei group was able to get a funding to hire a part-time social worker. And that was the Murayo Sawai that everyone talks about. And so she was hired by International Institute of East Bay, called IIBA. And even though she was hired to help the newcomer, Shin Isseis, but because she was the only social worker in the East Bay, she also got lots of requests about the needs of the older Isseis. And that's when, and I was her consultant, and I was a consultant to the International Institute. After finishing my social work degree at Cal Berkeley, I was working for Alameda County Mental Health Services. And they were very generous about us, spending time in the community doing outreach. And so that's when Murayo and I worked together and then joined the Sansei. So this is a real unique collaboration between Sansei and the newcomer Issei and some of the Nisseis. And so this is a little different from the San Francisco group. I think newcomer Isseis were mostly women, were very involved in kind of doing the actual helping of the Isseis, because we were able to communicate with the Isseis in Japanese, whereas I think most of the Sanseis and most of the Nisseis really weren't Japanese proficient. So that's where our collaboration came together. And that was really an exciting time for us, because now, for the first time, we were able to provide kind of assistance to the Japanese American community. And we were part of the community as opposed to the, kind of little shunned group. So that's just a wonderful kind of beginning of the collaboration between the newcomer Japanese and the American-born Nisei and Sansei group. And we're learning also from the Sansei's activism and Nisei's activism. Us coming from Japan, we were much more kind of reserved and just didn't understand that we could speak up. So that was really a wonderful role model to see the Sansei and Issei taking the action, and then we would follow them. So those are my experience getting started. Murayo Sawai really was pivotal in this EBJA getting going. Unfortunately, she died in the 80s, really quite young. But so thank you, Dennis, for mentioning her role.
Yes, and we definitely are thinking of her tonight and all of the work that she put into this community work. And I love what you're saying about multi-generational activism. That's so important, and it's truly a beautiful thing. And I'd love for Dennis to speak a little bit more about, gathering all that support. You outlined very nicely all of the different projects that East Bay Japanese for Action was able to put together and provide for the community. But how did how did all of these different groups, age ranges come together to gather support for the projects that you wanted to accomplish? And how did you get, sort of this organizational structure and funding in place to make it all happen?
Let me start with the second question about funding. The project began with local community donations, but as we started to think about grant funding, we needed a formal structure. And so we formed a nonprofit corporation in April of '71, and that was the start of EBJ and the beginning of the 50 years. After we incorporated, we received grants from an Oaks Foundation, the UCB student body, and from the Commission on Aging, and Meals on Wheels. So that was kind of our main sources of beginning funding. And as the projects grew, we tried to make EBJ encompass the total community and the organizations involved. And as the projects grew in time, they became more popular. Like you said, we did have at the beginning that picture with myself, and there was a picture of a gentleman from the Berkeley JCL, and there was also other ministers and ministers of the Buddhist church and the Christian churches that were very instrumental in not only supporting us, but also encouraging the Isseis to participate. And sitting next to me is Tad Hirota. He is from Berkeley, and Murayo Sawai is to his left. Let's see. As far as the projects, it kind of grew organically in the sense that once it got started with the students, I think a lot of students, like was mentioned, came from the Asian studies classes. And as you'll see in the slideshow at the end, there was a lot of students that participated at the beginning. And as Reiko said, we did have Nisei support, like I said, the ministers, Marianne Takagi and others. So that's how we kind of got the community involved. And also we had to get the support of the Isseis to continue to participate. And so we had to prove to them that we were reliable and that the projects would continue. And through transportation and through the meetings, it became apparent, hopefully to them, that we wouldn't just disappear as a one-shot deal. And so as the program continued, they began to trust us and enjoy being with us. And so as the program grew, they begin to realize that they enjoyed and wanted the programs. And one of the things, I think there's a slide showing at one time in the 80s where EBJ had to protest or try to get support for continued funding from the cities. And so the Isseis were involved with that. One of the ladies testified at a hearing in the city of Berkeley. I think it might have been for their Commission on Aging. And also they attended the Berkeley City Council meeting, which is the next slide. So as a result, you know, Issei, with community support and the Issei support, the projects continue.
That's wonderful. I'm sure the Issei were inspired to see the Nisei and the Sansei, like Reiko said, using their voices and urging them to get out there. Did you have to rally the Issei to attend those meetings and maybe give them a little fire?
Yeah.
So Reiko, I would love to hear more from you about some of your proudest moments of EBJA and the things that you were able to accomplish. What are some of the things that, you know, Dennis outlined some things, but that you were directly involved in, that you were able to offer the community, and what kind of people were you working with who were taking advantage of and enjoying the services that you were providing? What were they like? How many people participated?
You know, the members of Himawari Kai, about maybe 15, 18 of them were participating in and like helping out on very popular evenings were bingo nights. and then so our Shin Issei would come and, you know, help make arrangements and all the support services. And then we'd also go visit Channing Way, you know, and then kind of sing with them and talk with them. And some of them are also provided housekeeping services. One of my really very moving, proudest time is when I think EBJA organized, I don't know exactly when, I think maybe 75, 74, around when the Japanese American community was coming together to demand reparation. And that, you know, we needed to really bring to the attention of the sacrifices that the Japanese Americans had to suffer. And there was quite a bit of concern even among the JSCL community about whether that's such a good thing to do. But I think EBJA was part of the group to organize exhibit of the photographs of the internment camps. And there was a concern about whether it's a good idea to take the Issei there, because it's, you know, it's a really very painful, emotional experience for them, whether that would be just too traumatic and painful memory for them. And we debated about it, and we decided, no, this is, you know, part of what they really went through, and that we really owed them a chance to take a look at what it was like. And so, you know, we were all there just in case they really became emotionally distressed. And the Issei was mostly women, and they really were just tremendously moved. And some of them started to cry, but that was not a damaging thing. That was a very moving thing. And they wanted to talk about their experience in the concentration camp. And we were there to, you know, listen to them and talk with them. And it was just such a moving experience. And then they also then after that, they started writing in these our recollections in that became a book. but in there, they really talk about the real hardships they suffered. And so that was just mostly so much more suffering that the Issei women had to do. And the thing about it is that most of the written record up to that time was mostly how Issei men suffered and succeeded, overcame, but there was nothing really written by Issei women. So this was, a great chance for Issei women to share their own experiences. So that is one scene that I most strongly remember. And of course, there were other fun times that we would go out for outings, picnics. They loved it. They also talked about, in addition to Tahoe, they were invited to Seattle by the Seattle Japanese Senior Center. Do you remember that, Dennis? Anyway, so, and they apparently, the Seattle Japanese Senior Center people wanted to reciprocate. I guess they were welcome to the Bay Area. And so they invited the East Bay and Bay, I think, San Francisco groups. And those seniors just, Issei so loved that trip. And there's a story about their visit in the book that is published. So those are my fond memories.
That's so moving. And, as a female documentarian today, I so respect and admire and, appreciate the work that you did to document those stories and really make sure that they're not lost, especially from a female perspective. And there's so much value in that work that you did. So thank you for that. I would love to, there's so much more to talk about, but we have Bob waiting in the wings, and I'd love to bring him in for his portion to tell us more about how he got involved with East Bay Issei housing. And like I mentioned in the introduction, after the East Bay Japanese for Action was established and already conducting all of this great work, Bob came along because he said he read an article about a community meeting about housing for Issei, likely in the Nichibei newspaper. So Tomo will have to fact check that when you write your article on this event. And he decided to attend. And there he met Phyllis Ogata and Laura Date, who had been providing services through EBJA. And the story continues from there. So Bob, thank you again for joining us. And I would love for you to tell us what you learned when you attended that meeting and why housing for Japanese American seniors was such a big issue at the time, and about what you learned about the need that was discussed that evening.
Good evening. I just thinking back, I think it's interesting that the three of us, Dennis, Reiko, and I were at Cal about at the same time. I was there from, I think, 63 to 69, although I was an engineer. So I wasn't involved in social issues then, but later on, I did, after I went to law school and got out, I felt that I wanted to participate in the community. And one of the first things I did as a new attorney in 1975 was to join the Eden Township JACL. And but going back to today's topic, my interest in housing for Isseis started because of a friend of my family's, Mrs. Kawada, who was an Issei on a very limited budget. And I managed to get an apartment for her in Hayward at a senior project called the Josephine Lum Lodge, which was operated by Eden Housing, which has been an affordable housing company for many years. And I didn't know it then, but Eden Housing would play a big story in our history. So at any rate, So that my experience with Mrs. Kawana and Josephine Plum Lodge planted seeds in my mind about the need for more Issei housing, because at that time there wasn't any, at least in the East Bay. In San Francisco, I believe at that time there was Kimochi. But at any rate, at that meeting with in Berkeley, I think it was in 1976, I met Laura Date and Phyllis Ogata, and we talked about the social services that EBJA had been providing, and we agreed that there was a need for senior housing for our community in the East Bay, because as I said before, there wasn't any at the time. So that's my answer to that.
Great. And so what type of housing, once you sort of established the need, what type of housing were you hoping to develop? How did you jump into that? And how did you begin to drum up support for these projects or housing that you envisioned?
Well, our wish list for housing was a place where Isseis would feel comfortable, where some staff spoke Japanese, and where Japanese food was available. And we also wanted rents to be affordable because, you know, a lot of the Isseis are on a limited budget. So we felt that in order to build a housing project, which, you know, that's a significant financial undertaking, we would need to involve the greater JA community in the East Bay for community input, for community support, and to raise funds. So we decided to try to recruit JACL chapters in Alameda County and some in Contra Costa County, and also some of the JA churches in those counties. And to my knowledge, that was the first time that the East Bay JA community was united to work on a single project. It probably took us 2 years of numerous evening meetings with the different organizations, and that we ultimately recruited 23 different organizations to form East Bay Issei Housing, which is EBIH, which was incorporated in 1978. As we said earlier, I was the president for a long time and served on the board for some more, but we spent about 7 years and looked at probably 40 different sites all over Alameda County for a property that would be suitable and affordable. Excuse me. Our big break came by accident. I was at an event in Hayward in 1981 and ran into a friend of mine, Eileen Weinreb, who was a former mayor of Hayward, and I'd known her for a long time. I told her about EBIH and our search for a housing project, and she said that she was on Eden Housing Board, and that there was a site off of Cypress Avenue in Hayward that was owned by Caltrans, and that we should look at. So we looked at it, and we later agreed to form a joint venture of Eden Housing and EBIH. Eden would help us tie up the property because, you know, they had a lot of experience with that, and we would raise the necessary funds to acquire it. And I think it was really attractive to them that we were a broad-based community organization, and having us as a partner, I think was very attractive to us. And they were attractive to us because they'd been doing this for a long time. They knew senior housing development and operations. And we had the capability of raising money from our community. And we fortunately were able to raise about $100,000 from the community. And we loaned that to the joint venture, and it was used to acquire the property and to make features of the project available that had ordinarily would not approve. We added balconies and patios, and we got a lot of help from local nursery people with the plants and the design of the garden. So we spent a lot of time looking for an architect, and I think the architect we chose was Kodama and Associates, Steve Kodama. We spent a lot of time going over the design and supervising the construction. Eden Housing navigated and obtained a HUD loan and Section 8 subsidies for the tenants. And both organizations together formed Eden Issei Housing to own and operate the project. Because of our many ties in the community, when we opened up, we had a waiting list, and the majority of the people on the waiting list were Isseis, people from our community. So that was really, that was fortunate.
It's an incredible feat. Do you, are you able to share more about the other properties that were developed through Issei Housing? So the one you just mentioned was the Eden Issei Terrace. And then there are, I believe, 3 other properties that were all created, purchased, and one donated, which I think is just so an incredible story of generosity.
I think the first property we acquired was property in Hayward. It was about a block away from the Eden Issei Terrace, and it had a couple of buildings on it that were rented out to tenants. And we acquired that for Isseis who were not able to live independently, which is what the Eden Issei Terrace was. That was for independent living people. We bought the Cypress House property across the street for the Isseis that were not independent living. And we were able to buy that with the help of a loan from the Sumitomo Bank in Hayward to finance the purchase. And Sumitomo, again, they knew about us because of our community, and they were glad to be able to make the loan to us. Another property that we bought was the Channing Way House, which has been mentioned before because they had some Isseis in there, and we were able to buy the property from the owners who were Sanseis, and I think they carried the financing for that purchase. And that again was, I think, in large part because of our reputation in the community. And then the last property we acquired was an apartment building in Berkeley on San Pablo Avenue. I think it was a 6-plex, and it had been owned for many years by the Landscape Gardeners Association. And again, they knew who we were, what we were trying to do, and they contacted us, and they wanted to give us the property. So that was fortunate. Fundraising was really important to pay for these properties, these loans. And there were a number of ways that we raised funds. For many years, we ran regular bingo games. I think we rented a place in Berkeley, North Berkeley. And then for a while, maybe it was at the Southern Alameda County Buddhist Church. Another way we raised funds were fundraisers. And I really have to mention an Oakland company, Issei Plastics, which was owned by a couple of Issei guys. And they knew a lot of golfers, and they had a couple of golf tournaments for us. A third way was we had a lot of very generous donors from the community. And then fourthly, our member organizations held fundraisers and donated to us. So, this was a memorable and exciting time in our lives, at least mine.
Well, it's just an incredible effort, a mountainous effort of so many people coming together, which is why it's so inspiring to revisit how this all started. And, when you say you looked for a site for 7 years and it took 23 organizations to come together and every dollar counts, that's what really, really makes it inspiring, is the community coming together. And I would love to transition back to some reflection on all of this great work, and remind everyone listening, please feel free to chat your questions if you have any. We'll be happy to ask our panelists any questions, or even if you want to share some of your own reflections or memories with the group, please do so. Chat and let us know. But after all this great foundational work, in 1986, EBJA and East Bay Issei Housing merged to form the Japanese American Services of the East Bay, and Nisei's began to need more support. In 2010, JSEB, all the acronyms, Japanese American Services of the East Bay, JSEB, I hope that's the right way, became J-Sei and adopted an expanded mission to serve all generations of Japanese Americans. So now we're here celebrating our 50th anniversary. So I'd love to pose this to any one of you who'd like to answer first. It took a lot of effort, a lot of work, many years, many dollars. When you first started your community work, how did you stay focused on what you were hoping to accomplish? Go ahead, Bob.
For the housing part, our goal was clear. And we had a lot of community support to help us reach that goal. And so, although it took a lot of years to get there, staying focused was never an issue. It was a joy to be a part of the project.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'd like to add, when we started, we were all young idealists. Thought we could change the world. And I mentioned it before that, the group of sanseis were very much not bilingual. And here we are trying to start a project for bilingual services, either idealistically or stupid or just crazy, thinking we could do something like that. But as it developed, with the help of Mariah, Reiko, and many other people, we did begin our, Japanese speaking services with Laura and Phyllis, as mentioned before. But I think the organization, EBJ, tried to involve community organizations. And as we were successful at getting more and more people on the board, we started to get people that were more supportive, more professional, because as young students, we didn't know anything about finance or building or anything, although housing was a good idea. But I think it was the evolution of the organization to get more professional people like Bob and others that could do those projects. So I think it just, everything just kind of happened. Evolved as the need arose, I think is what.
Great. And Reiko?
Okay, I think what we stayed focused on is that so long as there was a need, that there was for us to really devote ourselves. And the needs kept evolving into different directions. And what is really wonderful is that, you know, we were good at some communication and we were good at doing services, but then all the other different needs brought in different talent, like, you know, Robert's financial and real estate. My God, that's a totally different field for us. But it's coming together of all these talents was just a wonderful ways of staying focused and accomplishing the evolving mission for our community. And, you know, our community is evolving and we need to move with it. So that's how I feel.
Wonderful. And I wanted to share a comment from Grace Yotsuya. She says, early in EBJA's development, we recognized that the East Bay encompassed a vast geographic area and was made up of many enclaves of Japanese American communities. There was a concerted effort to include on the EBJA board members from the various Japanese American organizations throughout the East Bay. So EBJA enjoyed the support of the activist members of those organizations who believed in our goals and actively moved the EBJA organization along. Yes, so it was a very targeted effort to make sure that you were doing outreach to the right people and bringing those communities together. Excellent. Thank you, Grace, for sharing that. So another question I have is, 50 years later, what do you as founders of these foundational organizations think of the expanded services of J-Sei and how it's grown over the years? What have you enjoyed seeing come out of the seeds that you planted? And what new things do you hope to see created for generations to come?
Well, I'll go.
Go for it.
When I started, I had no idea that I would be benefiting from the services. But now I'm in my 80s and I just love programs at J-Sei. And I also come to lunch programs and I have a chance to really meet all kinds of different people. And it's just wonderful that the J-Sei has expanded its mission, and that rightfully, because, you know, our community is so dispersed as opposed to San Francisco area. J-Sei provides a non-denominational community focus that brings in, you know, you don't have to be a Christian, you don't have to be a Buddhist, you don't have to be a JACO member. You just come and enjoy. And the leadership of the J-Sei is so welcoming of all people, including our Shin Issei. It's I'm just so delighted that it has evolved and it's continuing to serve our community. Thank you.
Wonderful. Anyone else?
Well, I think, you know, I moved away in the 80s and I've been away for many years until J-Sei had their open house and we came back. And I think, you know, I'm not that familiar with, you know, where they're at, but I know that once our organization continued to evolve, it evolved to meet the needs of the community that it was serving. And so, you know, you hear things about, well, J-Sei shouldn't do this or you know, shouldn't do that or whatever. But I think, you know, once we left the organization, our influence, speaking of the sanseis that are no longer involved, you know, I had to let it go to provide whatever services, you know, were needed. Nisei services now, sansei services, you know, so to speak. I think it's great that it's continuing.
Wonderful. And Bob, how about you?
Well, I'm impressed by the names on the board. People who are very knowledgeable and professional, and quite capable of leading J-Sei into the new fields and providing service to the broader JA and Asian community in our area. And for that, I appreciate their continued and evolving work.
Wonderful. Well, I know I loved Reiko's answer to this question, and I actually want to ask Bob and Dennis something, and after that, Reiko, you can share another memory. But, you know, what are some of your proudest moments of your work? You know, I never asked Bob about, you know, the day seniors moved in and the property opened, or, you know, it could be anything that you just reflect on and you feel very proud of. I'd love to hear from you, whoever is ready to go first.
Well, my fondest memory was I think there's one of the photos that you displayed was a newspaper article about the grand opening for the Issei Terrace. And, you know, it had taken so long, and it had come to fruition. And it was everything that I and the many people who had worked on this had ever dreamed of. And I'm thankful for that.
Yes. And we definitely will, when we're done, we're going to do a round of applause for all of you. And how about you, Dennis? Is there a particular moment that sticks out for you?
Well, it's hard for me. A lot of the moments have passed. And so I know, I mean, we tried to talk to a lot of people, or not a lot. Some of the people we're able to contact from the original EBJA. And I think it's just the joy and the camaraderie of working with others and the Isseis. I mean, they imparted lots of knowledge on us from their experiences. I think that's kind of just the personal things. I don't think there's any one event except that everything is continuing. And that's kind of amazing in itself. But it's like planting a seed and everything grew into what it is today. And that's a great thing, I think. Yeah.
Absolutely. And Reiko, is there anything that, you know, we haven't mentioned, or people we haven't mentioned or brought up yet, that you'd like to mention or bring up in this discussion of your work in the founding of J-Sei?
No, I think you've really been very good at kind of pulling me out, and so no, I'm very happy to have had a chance to really share my own recollection and my own sort of joy of finding J-Sei thriving so much more and so well organized. So yeah, thank you so much.
Oh,
I'm
of course.
very grateful.
I'm grateful to you. And how about Bob and Dennis? Is there any other reflection or person or memory that you would like to mention?
For me, I mean, you know, we've talked about Phyllis and Laura kind of, you know, carrying the organization from the mid-70s on, you know, through housing. But there are many, many people that volunteered and were dedicated to providing services for the Isseis. And so I think we need to give a shout out to everyone. There are a number of people on the call that were in EVJ at the beginning, and also some that are, many also that were helped to continue the programs up, you know, through the 80s. So I think all those founders should raise their hand and we can applaud them. Thank you.
Yeah, I would like, well, this is a good segue, Dennis. I would love to give a round of applause to everyone in attendance, panelists, and audience members who put in time, effort, energy, love, and care into all of the great community work that is still very much alive and well today. And it has been so inspiring for me personally to learn so much about it in advance of this panel and on this panel. And I want to thank you all for being here and for our panelists for sharing their memories. And I do have one more question for each of you. And that is, what advice do you have for today's young community organizers? We've all been through a very interesting past year, a lot of different social movements arising out of what has taken place. And I think we could all use some sage advice from some very wonderful activists of the past who put in a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. So whoever would like to start first with some advice for generations to come, we'd love to hear it.
Well, let me start. I just have this to say to today's young people. There's always something you can do to help the community. Go out there and find it and do it. And you'll be satisfied, greatly satisfied with your involvement.
Love that, thank you. Dennis?
I concur, they should just find a cause and go for it. Because, you know, that's what we did in the days, and don't be discouraged by the people that tell you can't do something. You know, you just have to, you can.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And so my thing also is to don't hesitate to speak up and don't give up, continue. I think Japanese Americans or Japanese have a tendency to, you know, well, we talk about shikata ga nai, but that's not, that won't get us any place. When there's a need, when there are issues, when there's injustice, we need to speak up. And the more we bring people together, then there's a strength that it will be heard eventually. So let's, and we really appreciate all the people involved in J-Sei now. And that's kind of a, you know, sort of proof that we are continuing to be meaningful and valid. So thank you.
Thank you so much for your good advice. We're revved up, ready to go. Another 50 more years. Well, if I would like to ask one more time from the audience, if anyone has any questions for our panelists or comments to share, feel free to mention yourself in the chat and I can call on you, or maybe let's see if I can change myself to gallery. And did I see a hand go up? There was it B Takeshita? If you unmute yourself, why don't you go ahead and ask a question? I think you're still on mute. Oh, there you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, congratulations to Reiko and Dennis and Bob. Big time for all of us. But I would just want to say that Dennis and Grace had asked me to start a senior center in Contra Costa County. And I had no idea what that meant because they had just finished making it in Berkeley. So there was no Japanese list or anything, but the telephone book in those days had the Japanese name and the address and the phone numbers. So my wife and I would look through all our telephone book, find out the Japanese names. There were no lists available at that time. and we would then call them, and we would try to concentrate on getting the Issei, the first generation, our parents actually, and get them started. So then after we got the list, I started to call them, each one, speak to them in Japanese when necessary, and try to get them interested in forming a senior center. And we got about 30 people initially, and we opened up a storefront on San Pablo Avenue and started there. And then we also went to Sycamore Church and got June Sakaguchi, and her husband was the Reverend of Sycamore Church. And so got June to help us be the first coordinator of the Sakai. And we started in the storefront in San Pablo. And that's the way we started. But it wasn't something that came all at once. You have to look for and contact people and do it. But it was a pleasure. And these Bob and Dennis and Reiko really worked. I remember them all because they worked very hard to keep this thing going. And I appreciate that I was part of that. Thank you for a good show. And you too, Lauren.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. Would anyone else like to share anything or ask a question of our panelists?
Hi. I'd like to just commend everybody who, thought about and started it and persevered to keep it going, because doing something like this for 50 years is just unbelievable. But I think with the short experience I've had with J-Sei, there's a large community of people out there that are waiting to be asked. I was one of those that somebody had to ask me. But once you're asked to help, you put yourself into it and then realize it and appreciate all of the benefits that you're providing to another party and another group. And slowly, as Reiko said, I'm going to join that group pretty soon. So I hope that kind of activity still persists. But my hat's off to you for starting this and persisting and making it happen. And all of those that have been active in the J-Sei to keep it going for the last 50 years, and more recently in the last 6 that I've been familiar with it, I think there's enough strength in it to continue going for another 50. And it's just a matter of the community staying together and also getting their kids involved as well. So thank you very much. And Lauren, thank you very much for your moderating, because I found you very impressive in being able to make this all work nicely and very smoothly. So I thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Aki. Well, I'm just so pleased to be a part of this, and I would be remiss if I also didn't recognize Executive Director Diane Wong and Education Coordinator Jill Shiraki, who work very hard to put together all of these incredible programs and have brought me into the loop, which I very much appreciate. And they're wonderful people, so who are keeping that spirit alive. So thank you very much to them for all of their hard work. We have just a few more minutes. I know we wanted to share just a short 2-minute slideshow of some photos that Jill had put together. But before we do that, I would like to ask if there's anyone else who would like to share or ask a question of our panelists. Okay. Well, we'll go to the slideshow, and then if anyone has any last questions or comments, we'll come back to you after the slideshow. So Jill, feel free to start when you're ready. Oh, I did want to say, I'm sorry, that a lot of these photos were taken by Thomas Okamoto of some of the very beginnings of this community work. Oh, I love that music. That was so beautiful. Thank you for those who commented. Lisa Oyama says, I don't have a question, but I just wanted to say thank you to all the panelists, the founders, and all of you who keep the J-Sei going, growing, and evolving. Thank you, Lisa. John Funabiki. Hi, John. This program is a nice tribute to all the pioneers who broke the ground for J-Sei. Thanks for the shout out to people like Edison Uno, another activist who had a lot of impact, not only for the Japanese American community, but others as well. And Diane says a very big thank you to Thomas Okamoto for many of these images.